Hi everybody, I'm Danielle Diva Q Bennett, and today we're going to be taking you through how to smoke a brisket. This here, right in front of me, is what's commonly referred to as a full packer brisket. A full packer brisket is comprised of actually two unique muscles. There is this part here, which is where the lean is, or your flat, long slices. And then this part up here has a lot more internal marbling, and that is actually where our burnt ends come from. This brisket has a bit of a challenge to it. It's got lots of fat, it's got lots of top surface membrane, and we're gonna trim it all up so that we can get all that delicious rub and wood-fired smoke from the Traeger grills into this brisket. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna trim out this rough side. Now, when it's in the packing house, one of the things is this is actually cut by a mechanical saw. And so it's really a rough texture. So we're gonna take a nice little cut and clean it all up. As you can see, we've got some nice marbling in there. This up here, we're gonna trim out the fat just a little bit, once again, around that rough edge. Now, all these trimmings and things like that, you can keep it for, grinding into sausage, making snackage, whatever you wanna do. Cutting off the rough edge over here at the end, and once again, turning our knife to trim out this end here. We've now eliminated that entire rough section from all that side. On the opposite side of this brisket, it's nice and smooth. So there's really no reason to cut it out at all. It's already nicely shaved off, cleaned up, looking good. We're gonna be eventually taking off all of this surface membrane and all of this fat surface because we actually want the rub to actually penetrate into the meat as well as our wood-fired flavor. One of the challenges of this is this really hard section of fat right at the very top. This entire section is actually covering an entire ledge of meat. So, how do we get rid of it? Take your knife, make an incision from the top down to the very edge at the very top part of this fat. When you cut into the fat at the very top of this brisket, one of the things is you want to do this in small increments. You don't want to cut down too far. So what you want to do is actually just take the tip of your knife and cut down until you get to the next fat line. Now, do this slowly in small cuts. Once you get it cut down, you can see that we're down to the next ledge, the level where we're going to cut an entire straight cut across to get rid of this hard pocket of fat. Take the corner with your knife and cut out that entire ledge of fat. Now you notice, once you get that big, hard, triangular piece of fat in, we've now enabled all of that beautiful protein to come out to the surface. So this will take barbecue rub and smoke into it now. Once we're done that, come to the very top of the brisket. Take a little notch right down to that fat line again and move it backwards. Now we have an entire ledge up at the top here in order for us to build bark and much more flavor. The next step is actually to get rid of all of this surface membrane. So here's a tip for you. Take your hand, prop it up underneath the brisket, and bring the briskets flat up a little bit. It'll make it easier to manipulate your knife around the fat. Take thin slices all the way across the top and remove them one by one. Nice thin slices. Continue on, removing all that surface membrane and any silver skin you see until you've only got protein left on the top. That's really important. Once again, we're trying to enable this to get as much beautiful rub and smoke in the surface. And remember, no problem, move the brisket to where you need it. Now, your grill should be running at 225 degrees while you're doing all this prep work. If you want, you can actually prep the entire brisket the night before, but if you want to go right to the grill, that's okay too. 225 degrees, and you can use any flavored hardwood pellets you like. I love using hickory and oak or hickory and mesquite for my briskets. Lots of fat, lots of flavor, but we want to enable this bark to be built up right on the top. If you've got a really thin edge on the side, you might want to consider doing this and just doing a nice trim cut so that you end up having not jerky towards the ends, but a nice slice of brisket. As you can see, we're kind of squaring it up as we go. If you're brand new to brisket, one of the key tips you have to remember is that when you get to the flat, you can see the protein strands all going in one direction. Now, when this brisket is completely cooked and it's been smoked, it's gonna be a little darker. So you have to remember to cut against the grain when it comes off the grill. Okay, we've got one more section down here and we're just about done trimming this brisket. For home use, there's no reason to trim the fat cap on the opposite side. You can leave it as is. So, once again, to review all the parts of our brisket. This is the flat. This is where the lean slices come from. This is the point up here. This is where our burnt ends come from. And this backside, this is commonly referred to as the fat cap. For us at home, you don't really need to trim this, but it's really important that this has all been trimmed just like this. Now we've got our brisket all trimmed. It's actually time to make a simple brisket rub that anybody can do at home. Just 6 ingredients, that's all it is. So we've got black pepper, kosher salt or sea salt. We've got a little bit of chili powder, some delicious paprika, whether it's smoked or regular paprika. We have got some onion powder and garlic powder, or granulated onion or granulated garlic powder. See, 6 ingredients, a really nice brisket rub, ready to go. Just give it a good stir. And once it's all stirred up, you're ready to season your brisket. That's it. So we have a completely trimmed up brisket. We have our rub all assembled. Now it's time to season our brisket up. Start with your brisket, meat side down, fat cap up. The reason is that I always try to season the presentation side last. All briskets, all pork butts, they should actually be going on your Traeger grills, fat cap down. So start off with it, meat side down, to start the seasoning. First step for me is always to spritz my meat. This is basic apple juice. The reason is this is kind of like the glue that holds the rub on. Also, smoke is water soluble, so it's really a good idea to introduce some surface moisture. You'll get a better smoke ring and a better wood-fired flavor. Take a handful of your rub, be generous, and season your brisket. Take the time to actually rub it into the surface of the meat, making sure you don't miss any of these little sections. You eat all sides, so you really should season all sides. Season generously. We're gonna be putting this on the grill at 225 degrees, low and slow. Lots of deliciousness. Once you've got your bottom fat cap all completely seasoned up, as you can see, we didn't miss any areas, you wanna flip it over and season up the other side, the meat side, really generously. Give it a little spritz. Nice and simple. And then once again, another handful of that rub. Nice and generously, everywhere along the brisket. We're adding a ton of rub to this brisket to give it lots and lots of flavor. You can smell that onion and that garlic and the paprika, and that combined with all that wood-fired goodness is gonna make for some tasty, tasty brisket later. All right. Couple more spritzes, we're going to the grill. 225 degrees, directly on the grate, fat cap down. Here we go. It's really important that if you're temping your brisket later on during the cooking process, that you're taking the temperature from up here in the thickest part of the brisket. That's really important. And remember, once an hour, until it gets to the temperature of between 160 and 170 degrees, you want to be spritzing it with apple juice. Really simple. Close the lid, come on back in an hour to check it. So every hour on the hour, you want to spritz your brisket with some apple juice. That'll actually encourage the development of the bark and give it a beautiful, beautiful surface. Lots of goodness, lots of mahogany bark. A little bit of apple juice really helps that process. Every hour, spritz your brisket. That's it. Our brisket's been on a few hours now. One of the things is we're gonna temp the brisket, make sure it's between 160 and 170 degrees, and then it's gonna be time to wrap our brisket. So here's where you take the temperature. Right up here in the top section. We're looking for between 160 and 170 degrees. And we're right there right now. Our brisket has been on the grill until it got to between 160 and 170 degrees. And now it's time to wrap. For this brisket, we're gonna wrap it in 2 layers of foil. You can see this is a very generous piece of foil. We've got a brisket halfway through the cooking process. We're gonna place this right in the middle of our foil. Now, we've got some beef broth. Now, don't add the beef broth until you actually make your packet up. So bring your sides up, nice and neat, both of them, just like that. 2 layers. And you wanna wrap it nice and neat. Not only do you wanna wrap it nice and neat, you want it to be very tight around the brisket, because we want to get some of that beef broth flavor in there, and we actually want to expedite the cooking process. That's actually why we wrap our briskets. We want to actually tenderize the brisket and speed up the entire cooking process. So we've got a couple folds there. You want to come to the other edge. You're going to do some nice generous folds. And then you really want to kind of smoosh it right next to the brisket so it's nice and tight. Now on this side, I like to make a bit of a funnel. So tilt it up towards you. Because you've already established a bit of a funnel, it makes it really easy to add the beef broth, just like that. And then a nice wide fold up towards the top of the brisket. And once again, smooshing the sides in so it's a nice tight package, ready to hit the grill again. We want to finish this brisket between 206 degrees and 210 degrees, or until the probe, when put in the thickest part of the brisket, feels like it's going into room temperature butter. Put it back on the grill, nice and neat. And you want to make sure that in about an hour or 2 hours, you want to actually come in and with a digital thermometer, take a look at the temperature. You're looking for anywhere from 206 to 210 degrees, anywhere in there. All right, it's time to take our brisket off. It has been on for hours. And so we're gonna take it off the grill and we're gonna give it some rest time before we slice it. Okay, our brisket is completely done. It has been resting for quite a while. Now it's time to slice our brisket up. So, I've got some hot gloves on. So these are nitrile gloves or basic cotton gloves. This gives me lots of protection and make sure that my hands don't get burnt from this super hot brisket. Open it up very carefully. Remember, all that beef broth in there is really hot. It smells like a lot of wood-fired goodness. Take a look at how gorgeous this brisket is. We've got a slicing knife here. It's got a Granton edge on it. This is the perfect knife to do all types of large slicing with. And we've got a gorgeous brisket here with tons of delicious bark all over. Carefully take it out of the package. Now remember, it's gonna be a little jiggly, so be careful. Keep your beautiful beef broth to the side because you're gonna want to dredge your slices through that. And here is our gorgeous brisket. We wanna make sure we cut against the grain in order to have delicious brisket slices. Okay. There are two components of this brisket. This flat right here that's completely done and our point up here that is also completely done. We actually want to take this point and separate it from the flat so we can make burnt ends. Here's how you do it. Super easy. Take your hand, and you can see if you pop it up, there's actually a fat line in there that'll completely separate. Take your knife and carefully run it right underneath that flat, right above the point. It should glide through there like nobody's business, super easy because you're going through delicious fat. And look at this, look at how easy they separate. And now we can get on to the business of cutting this gorgeous brisket flat. 100% goodness, delicious loveliness. Get some beautiful slices out of this. And one of the things is, you wanna take a look at how gorgeous that smoke ring is. It's beautiful, succulent, wood-fired deliciousness. Perfect. Now, when it comes to slicing brisket, you can go as thick or as thin as you'd like. Typically though, you wanna go in a pencil thickness. So I'll show you a typical slice of brisket. So, right through that succulent, delicious middle, cut about a pencil width, and there you go. We've got a delicious slice of brisket. So from start to finish, that's how you do a completely smoked brisket on a Traeger. The basics, 101. For this recipe and more, visit traegergrills.com/recipes or make sure you download the app.